The text arrived at 7:43 p.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was debugging a client's firewall in my basement office. The notification chimed through my headphones, interrupting my focus on the security logs scrolling across 3 monitors. Coming by tonight. Sleep somewhere else. The sender, Rhett Vossin, my wife's boss, the self-proclaimed alpha male who ran Castle Rock Innovations like his personal kingdom. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before the implications fully registered. This wasn't a suggestion or a request. It was a command. From another man, about my own house. My name is Pierce Eldrow, and I've been married to Ayla for 15 years. I'm a freelance cybersecurity consultant, the kind of guy who notices digital footprints and remembers details others forget. Physically unremarkable at 42, I've learned to compensate with observation and patience. Most people underestimate me. That's usually their mistake. I climbed the stairs from my basement sanctuary, finding Ayla in the kitchen, her laptop open on the granite counter. She was video calling someone, her voice honey-sweet and professional. Of course, Rhett. Whatever you think is best for the team dynamic. She noticed me approaching and quickly ended the call, closing the laptop with practiced casualness. Hey, honey, how's the Henderson account coming along? Fine, I said, holding up my phone. Interesting message tonight. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The warm smile remained, but something flickered behind her eyes. Calculation, maybe, or resignation. Oh, that. She turned back to her laptop, fingers dancing over the keyboard. It's just leadership culture, Pierce. Rhett needs to discuss some sensitive client matters, and he prefers privacy for these conversations. In our house? It's more comfortable than the office, more conducive to creative thinking. I watched her navigate to our smart home dashboard, the same system I'd installed and configured 2 years ago. Her fingers moved with surprising confidence through the access controls. And I need to sleep somewhere else because... Please don't make a scene, honey. This is important for my career. You know how crucial this promotion is. She granted Rhett temporary access to the front door, scheduled for 8:30 p.m. through midnight. Then she disabled my administrative privileges with 3 quick clicks. There, she said, closing the laptop. All set. Maybe you could visit your friend Sage, or get a hotel room. I'll cover the expense. The casual way she said it struck me like a physical blow. Not the suggestion itself, but the practiced ease. This wasn't her first time making these arrangements. Sure, I said. No problem. Ayla blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Really? Really. Leadership culture, right? I wouldn't want to interfere with team dynamics. She smiled, relief washing over her features. Thank you for understanding. I knew you'd be reasonable about this. I returned to my basement office, but not to pack. Instead, I opened a secure folder on my primary workstation and began documenting everything. The text from Rhett, time-stamped and screenshotted. Ayla's modification to our access controls, logged automatically by the system. The calendar invite I just discovered, marked off-site review, and scheduled for tonight's exact time frame. But that wasn't all. I pulled the driveway camera logs from the past 6 months, searching for patterns. There they were, Rhett's silver BMW, arriving after hours on 17 different occasions. Always when I was supposedly out of town on client visits. Always with the same duration, approximately 3 hours. The smart lock system kept detailed records too. Every entry, every temporary access grant, every disabled security feature. Ayla had been methodical, but she'd forgotten that I built this system. I knew every log file, every backup, every metadata trail. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Rhett. 8:30 sharp. Make sure you're gone by then. Need complete privacy for tonight's discussion. I saved that too, preserving the metadata that proved when and where it was sent. Then I opened my contact list and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in months. Seren Dreven, chairwoman of the board at Castle Rock Innovations. Seren was old money, the kind of woman who'd built her fortune through careful investments and ruthless business decisions. She'd hired Rhett 3 years ago, but I'd always sensed she kept him on a short leash. Corporate governance was her specialty, and she didn't tolerate executives who created liability for the company. I composed my message carefully, attaching the relevant files. Ms. Dreven, I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out regarding some concerning communications I've received from Mr. Vossin. I wanted to verify whether these interactions comply with company policy and fiduciary duty standards. Please review the attached documentation and advise. Best regards, Pierce Eldrow. I included Rhett's texts, the smart home access logs, and a summary of the pattern I'd discovered. No accusations, no emotional language. Just facts and a polite request for clarification. My finger hovered over the send button for exactly 3 seconds. Then I pressed it. The reply came faster than I'd expected. My phone rang within 10 minutes. "Mr. Eldrow, this is Seren Drevin. I've reviewed your materials." Her voice was crisp, professional, with an undercurrent of controlled anger. "Thank you for taking the time to call, Ms. Drevin. These communications are completely inappropriate and potentially expose the company to significant liability. Mr. Vossin's visit tonight is hereby canceled. I'm revoking his access to your home immediately, and I'll be conducting a full review of his recent activities. I appreciate your prompt attention to this matter. Mr. Eldrow, I want to be clear about something. What you've documented here represents a serious breach of professional conduct. I'll be in touch regarding next steps." The line went quiet. I set the phone down and opened the smart home dashboard, watching as Rhett's temporary access disappeared from the system. Then I pulled up the driveway camera feed and settled in to wait. At 8:25 p.m., Rhett's BMW turned into our driveway. I watched him stride to the front door, straightening his tie and checking his reflection in the sidelight windows. He pressed the doorbell twice, then tried his temporary access code. The lock didn't budge. He tried again, jabbing at the keypad with increasing frustration. Then he pulled out his phone, probably calling Ayla. I climbed the stairs to find my wife frantically typing on her laptop, trying to restore Rhett's access. "It's not working," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "The system won't accept my administrator password." "That's because I changed it," I said calmly. She spun around, eyes wide. "What did you do?" I made a phone call to Seren Drevin, showed her the texts, the access logs, the pattern of visits, asked her if this was standard company policy. The color drained from Ayla's face. "Pierce, you didn't." "I did. And you know what? She was very interested in Rhett's leadership culture." The doorbell rang again, followed by aggressive knocking. "You have to let him in," Ayla said, moving toward the front door. "This is a disaster. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've protected my home and documented a pattern of inappropriate behavior." "What have you done, Ayla?" She stopped at the door, her hand on the deadbolt. Through the sidelight, we could see Rhett pacing on the porch, his phone pressed to his ear. "This is my career, Pierce. Everything I've worked for." "No," I said. "This is my house, and I'm not leaving." My phone buzzed. A text from Rhett, sent to both Ayla and me. "Open the door now, or there will be consequences." I screenshotted that too, adding it to the growing file of evidence. Wednesday morning arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. I woke to find 17 missed calls on my phone, 12 from Ayla and 5 from numbers I didn't recognize. The coffee maker had started its automatic cycle at 6 a.m., filling the kitchen with the aroma of dark roast, but Ayla was nowhere to be seen. I found her in the guest bedroom, still in yesterday's clothes, staring at her laptop screen with the hollow expression of someone who'd spent the night watching her world collapse. "Rhett's been suspended," she said without looking up. "Pending investigation." "Good morning to you, too." "This isn't a joke, Pierce. Seren called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. They're reviewing his entire employment history." I poured myself coffee and leaned against the door frame. "Sounds thorough." "You don't understand. I'm implicated in this. My performance reviews, my promotion timeline, everything is connected to Rhett's oversight. If he goes down, I go down with him." "Maybe you should have considered that before you started scheduling his visits to our house." She finally looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine fear. Not the calculated concern she showed during budget meetings or client presentations, but raw animal panic. "How long have you known?" "About the visits? 6 months. About the nature of those visits? I had suspicions, but last night confirmed everything." "What do you want?" The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? A year ago, I might have wanted an apology, couples therapy, some path back to the marriage we'd once had. But that man had been ground down by years of subtle dismissals, casual disrespect, and the slow erosion of his place in his own home. "I want you to pack a bag and stay somewhere else while I figure out our next steps. Pierce, please, we can work through this." "No, we can't. You chose Rhett over me, chose your career over our marriage, chose everything else over us. Now you get to live with those choices." I pulled out my phone and showed her the divorce papers I'd downloaded and filled out at 3 a.m. "I'm filing today. You can contest it if you want, but I have documentation of everything. The smart home logs, the calendar invites, the expense reports I pulled from your laptop while you were sleeping." Her face went pale. "You hacked my computer?" "I used the password you've had for 10 years, the same one you use for everything, not exactly hacking." I'd spent the early morning hours exploring Ayla's digital life, finding a trail of evidence that painted a clear picture of her relationship with Rhett. hotel receipts charged to the company card, restaurant bills for two during supposed client meetings, text messages that left little doubt about the nature of their leadership culture. The expense reports are particularly interesting, I continued. Rhett's been charging your dates to the company. Serene's going to love that detail. You're destroying my life. I'm documenting your choices. There's a difference. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Pierce Eldrow. Mr. Eldrow, this is Janet Walsh from Channel 7 News. We've received some interesting information about executive misconduct at Castle Rock Innovations. Would you care to comment? I looked at Ayla, whose expression had shifted from panic to horror. I'm sorry, but I don't have any comment at this time. We understand you've provided documentation to the company's board of directors regarding inappropriate behavior by CEO Rhett Vossin. Can you confirm whether this involves the misuse of company resources? You'll need to speak with Castle Rock's Public Relations Department. I ended the call, but it rang again immediately. Different number, same area code. Looks like word is getting out, I said to Ayla. How? The board meeting isn't until this afternoon. Board members talk. Reporters have sources. And Seren Drevin doesn't strike me as someone who keeps corporate liability issues quiet. The house phone rang next. Then Ayla's cell phone. Within 20 minutes, we had calls from 3 different news outlets and 2 legal firms that specialized in corporate whistleblower cases. This is insane, Ayla said, declining another call. It's like the whole city knows. Welcome to the information age. Scandals travel fast. I was making breakfast when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see a news van parked across the street. The reporter on our porch looked young and eager, the kind of journalist who'd made a career out of corporate exposés. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. Mr. Eldrow, I'm Mike Chen from Channel 12. We're investigating allegations of executive misconduct at Castle Rock Innovations. Sources tell us you've provided evidence to the board of directors. I'm not interested in speaking with the media. We understand this involves the misuse of company resources and inappropriate workplace relationships. Would you like to tell your side of the story? Behind me, I heard Ayla's sharp intake of breath. The reporter's questions were specific enough to suggest he had detailed information about the situation. No comment, I said, closing the door, but the damage was already done. By noon, there were 3 news vans on our street and a steady stream of phone calls. The story had taken on a life of its own, growing from a simple corporate governance issue into a full-blown scandal. I spent the afternoon in my basement office, monitoring the news coverage and fielding calls from lawyers. The story was everywhere. Local news, business journals, even a few national outlets that specialized in corporate malfeasance. The narrative was simple and compelling. Powerful CEO abuses his position, uses company resources for personal relationships, pressures subordinates into inappropriate situations. The fact that it involved someone's home made it more personal, more relatable to viewers who'd never heard of Castle Rock Innovations. Ayla stayed in the guest bedroom, emerging only to grab food from the kitchen. She'd stopped answering her phone entirely after a reporter somehow got her direct number. At 4 p.m., my phone rang with a call from Seren Drevin. Mr. Eldrow, I wanted to update you on this afternoon's board meeting. I appreciate that, Ms. Drevin. Mr. Vossin's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. We're also conducting a comprehensive audit of his expense reports and business activities. Your wife's position is under review as well. I understand. There's something else. We believe this situation may have broader implications. We're bringing in external investigators to review our entire executive structure. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That was corporate speak for a complete house cleaning. Rhett wasn't just losing his job, he was taking down anyone connected to his misconduct. Will there be any legal proceedings? That depends on what the investigation uncovers. But Mr. Eldrow, I want you to know that the board appreciates your discretion in bringing this matter to our attention. After she hung up, I climbed the stairs to find Ayla sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her laptop screen. Rhett's been fired, I said. She nodded without looking up. I know. HR called an hour ago. I'm suspended pending the outcome of their investigation. What will you do? I don't know. My career is over. No one will hire me after this. I'm the woman who slept with her boss and got caught. You made choices, Ayla. This is the consequence. She finally looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Acceptance. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a weary resignation. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, and now we both have to live with it. The evening news led with the story. Rhett's photo appeared on screen alongside footage of the Castle Rock Innovations building and a brief summary of the allegations. They didn't name Ayla, but anyone who knew her would recognize the details. I watched from my basement office, monitoring the coverage across multiple channels. The story had everything reporters loved: power, misconduct, corporate excess, and a relatable victim. By tomorrow, it would be national news. My phone buzzed with a text from Sage, my friend from the boxing gym. "Saw the news? You okay?" "Fine," I replied. "Justice served." "Want to grab a beer and talk about it?" "Maybe tomorrow, still processing everything." But I wasn't processing. I was planning. Because while Ayla and Rhett thought their story was over, I knew it was just beginning. The boxing gym smelled like sweat, leather, and decades of ambition. I hadn't been there in 6 months, but Sage Martinez greeted me like I'd never left. "Pierce, heard you've been making headlines." Sage was ex-police, the kind of guy who'd seen enough of the world's ugliness to appreciate simple justice. He ran the gym with old-school principles: work hard, respect others, and handle your problems like a man. Something like that. "Want to talk about it?" I wrapped my hands and stepped up to the heavy bag. The first punch felt good, the second felt better. By the 10th, I was finding a rhythm I'd forgotten I had. "My wife was sleeping with her boss," I said between combinations, "using our house for their meetings. Thought I was too weak to do anything about it." "Were you?" Another combination, harder this time. "Not anymore." Sage held the bag steady while I worked through my frustrations. Physical exercise had always helped me think clearly, and I needed clarity for what came next. "What's your end game?" he asked. "Justice. Real justice, not just corporate consequences." "Be careful, Pierce. Revenge has a way of consuming people. This isn't revenge. It's accountability." But even as I said it, I knew Sage was right to be concerned. Something had changed in me over the past week. The mild-mannered IT consultant who'd built his life around compromise and accommodation was gone, replaced by someone harder, more calculating, someone who'd learned to enjoy the game. After my workout, I drove to Murphy's Bar, a dive establishment where Castle Rock employees sometimes gathered after work. I'd done my research. Rhett was a regular, especially on Thursday nights when he held informal meetings with his inner circle. Tonight was Thursday. I found him at a corner table, surrounded by 3 junior executives who looked uncomfortable but trapped. Rhett was holding court, his voice carrying across the dimly lit room. "This is all a misunderstanding," he was saying. "Political correctness run amok. A man can't even have a private conversation anymore without someone crying harassment." I ordered a beer at the bar and listened to his version of events. According to Rhett, he was the victim of a vindictive husband and an overzealous board of directors. The company was making a mistake by firing him. He'd be vindicated within a week. "The truth is," he continued, his voice getting louder, "some people can't handle real leadership. They see alpha behavior and get intimidated. That's not my problem." One of the junior executives noticed me at the bar and whispered something to the others. They recognized me from the news coverage, and their discomfort was obvious. I picked up my beer and walked over to their table. "Mind if I join you? I couldn't help overhearing your leadership philosophy." Rhett looked up, his face flushing red when he recognized me. "You've got some nerve showing up here." "It's a public bar. I have as much right to be here as anyone." The junior executives started to stand, clearly wanting to escape the confrontation, but Rhett waved them back down. "No, stay. I want you to meet Pierce Eldrow, the man who destroyed my career because he couldn't handle his wife's professional relationships." "Professional relationships," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Ayla is a talented executive who deserved mentorship and guidance. If you were too insecure to understand that, it's not my fault." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery, scrolling to screenshots of the expense reports I'd found on Ayla's laptop. "Mentorship," I said, showing the screen to the table. "Like the $400 dinner at Romano's last month? Or the weekend retreat at the Marriott that was charged to the company development budget?" The junior executives leaned in to look at the evidence, their expressions shifting from uncomfortable to fascinated. This was better than any soap opera. "Those were legitimate business expenses," Rhett said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Right, business expenses. Like the champagne room at the Velvet Lounge that was billed as a client entertainment event." That wasn't true, but Rhett's reaction told me I'd hit close to home. His face went from red to pale in seconds. "You're making things up?" "Am I? Because I have 6 months of expense reports that paint a pretty clear picture of your leadership style." I stood up, finishing my beer. "But you're right about one thing, Rhett. I couldn't handle my wife's professional relationships. So I did something about it. The bar had gone quiet, other patrons turning to watch our conversation. Rhett was trapped between his need to save face and his growing realization that he was outmatched. "You think you've won something?" he said, standing up to face me. "You've destroyed your own marriage. Ayla will never forgive you for this." Ayla made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. She chose a real man over a weak computer nerd who hides in his basement. The insult was designed to provoke me, to make me lose control in front of witnesses. A year ago, it might have worked, but I'd learned something important over the past week. Sometimes being underestimated is an advantage. "You're right," I said calmly. "I am a computer nerd who hides in his basement, and that computer nerd just ended your career with a single phone call." I pulled out my phone again, this time opening the contact list. "Would you like me to call Seren Drevin right now? I'm sure she'd love to hear about your leadership philosophy." Rhett's bravado crumbled. The alpha male persona he'd cultivated for years couldn't survive the reality of his situation. He was unemployed, facing potential legal action, and publicly humiliated. All because he'd underestimated the quiet man in the basement. "This isn't over," he said, but the words sounded hollow. "Yes, it is." I left the bar feeling lighter than I had in months. The confrontation had been everything I'd hoped for. Public, humiliating, and completely one-sided. Rhett's reputation in the local business community was finished, but I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I drove to Castle Rock Innovations for the first time in years. The building was a monument to corporate ambition, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky. I'd helped design their security systems during the early days of my consulting business, back when Ayla was just a mid-level manager with big dreams. The lobby was buzzing with activity, employees clustering in small groups and speaking in hushed tones. The Rhett scandal had consumed the company, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and gossip. I approached the reception desk where a young woman I didn't recognize was fielding phone calls from reporters. "I'm here to see Ms. Drevin," I said during a brief lull. "Do you have an appointment?" "She'll want to see me. Tell her Pierce Eldrow is here." 5 minutes later, I was escorted to the executive floor where Seren Drevin maintained an office that reflected her status and power. The view overlooked the entire city, a constant reminder of her position above the ordinary world. "Mr. Eldrow, thank you for coming in. Please have a seat." Seren was exactly what I'd expected. Elegant, controlled, and ruthlessly intelligent. She'd built her fortune by reading people accurately and acting decisively. "I wanted to discuss the investigation's findings," she said, settling behind her desk. "We've uncovered some disturbing patterns in Mr. Vossin's behavior." "I'm not surprised. The expense report irregularities alone represent significant fraud, but there are other issues as well. Inappropriate relationships with multiple employees, abuse of company resources, and what appears to be a systematic pattern of misconduct." She opened a file folder and slid several documents across the desk. "Your wife's involvement appears to be limited to poor judgment rather than criminal behavior. However, her position with the company is no longer tenable." I reviewed the documents, seeing my own evidence reflected in the company's official investigation. The smart home logs, the expense reports, the timeline of inappropriate meetings. Everything I'd provided had been verified and expanded. "What happens next?" "Mr. Vossin will face both civil and criminal charges. The company will cooperate fully with law enforcement. As for your wife, she's been terminated, but we're prepared to provide a neutral reference for future employment." "That's generous. It's practical. We want this matter resolved quickly and quietly. Extended litigation serves no one's interests." I understood. Seren was offering Ayla a soft landing in exchange for her cooperation and silence. It was a reasonable deal, more generous than Ayla deserved. "There's one more thing," Seren said, closing the file folder. "We're restructuring our entire executive team. I'm looking for someone with your background to head our new cybersecurity division. The position would come with a significant salary increase and equity participation." The offer caught me off guard. "You want to hire me?" "You demonstrated excellent judgment and discretion in handling this situation. Those are exactly the qualities we need in our security leadership." It was a perfect ending to my story. The wronged husband not only gets justice, but also gets rewarded with career advancement. The kind of neat resolution that rarely happens in real life. "I'm flattered, but I'll need to think about it." "Of course. Take all the time you need." I left Castle Rock with mixed feelings. The job offer was tempting, but it felt too clean, too convenient, like Seren was trying to tie up loose ends rather than reward merit. That evening, I found Ayla packing her belongings in the guest bedroom. She'd been staying there since the scandal broke, maintaining the fiction that our marriage might survive. "Seren offered me a job," I said from the doorway. I know, she called to tell me about it. What did you think? Ayla folded a sweater and placed it carefully in her suitcase. I think she's trying to buy your silence. About what? There are things about this situation you don't know, Pierce. Things that go deeper than Rhett's misconduct. She sat on the bed, looking older than her 42 years. The stress of the past week had taken its toll, leaving her hollow-eyed and defeated. What things? Seren knew about Rhett's behavior long before you called her. She's known for months, maybe years. She was waiting for the right moment to act. Why? Because she wanted his job. The board was getting restless about the company's performance, but they needed cause to remove him. Your evidence gave her exactly what she needed. I processed this information, understanding its implications. You're saying I was manipulated. We all were. Rhett thought he was untouchable. I thought I was advancing my career, and you thought you were getting justice. But Seren was playing a longer game. How do you know this? Because she told me. This afternoon when she offered me the severance package. She wanted me to understand that she'd won, that everything had worked out exactly as she'd planned. The revelation should have made me angry, but instead, I felt something like admiration. Serene had orchestrated the entire sequence of events, using our personal drama to achieve her professional goals. It was ruthless and brilliant. Does it change anything? Ayla asked. I considered the question. Did it matter that I'd been manipulated if the outcome was still justice? Rhett was finished, Ayla was facing consequences for her choices, and I was stronger than I'd been in years. No, I said finally. It doesn't change anything. So what happens now? Now you finish packing, and I decide whether to take Seren's job offer. And us? There is no us, Ayla. There hasn't been for a long time. She nodded, accepting the finality of my words. I'm sorry, Pierce. For all of it. I know. But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't undo years of disrespect and betrayal. Sorry didn't restore the trust she'd shattered or repair the marriage she'd destroyed. Sorry was just another word. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my basement office when the doorbell rang. Through the security monitor, I could see a woman I didn't recognize standing on my porch. She was well-dressed, professional, with the kind of confidence that suggested she was used to getting what she wanted. I opened the door, leaving the chain lock engaged. Mr. Eldrow? My name is Rebecca Torres. I'm an investigative journalist with the Financial Tribune. I'd like to speak with you about Seren Dreven and Castle Rock Innovations. I'm not interested in speaking with reporters. I think you'll be interested in what I have to say. It's about how you were used to orchestrate a corporate takeover. That got my attention. I removed the chain lock and opened the door fully. Come in. Rebecca Torres was younger than I'd initially thought, probably early 30s, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd made a career out of uncovering uncomfortable truths. I've been investigating Castle Rock Innovations for 6 months, she said, settling into my living room. The Rhett Vossin scandal was just the tip of the iceberg. What do you mean? Seren Dreven has been systematically removing obstacles to her complete control of the company. Rhett was just the latest target. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. Over the past 3 years, 7 senior executives have been forced out of Castle Rock. All of them were potential rivals to Seren's authority. All of them left under circumstances that damaged their reputations and eliminated them as threats. I reviewed the documents, seeing a pattern of orchestrated scandals and manufactured crises. Each executive had been destroyed by evidence of misconduct, poor judgment, or ethical lapses. You're saying Rhett's downfall was planned? I'm saying Seren has been collecting ammunition against him for over a year. She knew about his inappropriate relationships, his expense account fraud, his abuse of company resources. She was waiting for the right moment to use it, and I provided that moment. Your call gave her the perfect opportunity. A wronged husband with documented evidence was much more credible than an anonymous tip or internal complaint. Rebecca showed me more documents, financial records, board meeting minutes, communication logs that painted a picture of calculated corporate warfare. The job offer was part of it too, she continued. Serene wanted to control the narrative, keep you close, make sure you didn't dig too deep into her methods. I turned down the job. I know, that's why I'm here. I think you're the key to exposing what she's really doing. I studied the evidence Rebecca had assembled, impressed by the depth of her investigation. She'd uncovered a conspiracy that went far beyond my personal drama with Ayla and Rhett. What do you want from me? Help. You have access to information I can't get. The smart home logs, the security footage, the digital evidence you collected. Combined with what I found, it could expose the entire operation. Why should I care? I got what I wanted. Rhett is finished, Ayla is facing consequences, and I'm moving on with my life. Because innocent people are being destroyed. Serene's next target is David Kim, the head of research and development. He's a good man with a family, and she's setting him up for the same treatment Rhett received. She showed me a preliminary dossier on David Kim, complete with manufactured evidence of misconduct and a timeline for his destruction. She's going to ruin his life just to consolidate her power. The moral argument was compelling, but I had another motivation: curiosity. I wanted to understand the full scope of what I'd been involved in, to see the complete picture of Serene's manipulation. What would you need from me? Everything. All the evidence you collected, your communications with Serene, any insights into her methods. I want to expose not just what she did, but how she did it. I spent the next hour reviewing Rebecca's investigation, understanding my role in a much larger story. Serene hadn't just used me to remove Rhett. She'd turned me into a weapon in her corporate war. "All right," I said finally. "I'll help you." "Really?" "Really. But I want something in return." "What?" "When you publish this story, I want my full role revealed. Not as a victim or a pawn, but as someone who chose to act. I want credit for bringing down Rhett, even if I was manipulated into it." Rebecca smiled. "Deal." We spent the next 3 weeks building our case. I provided technical expertise and digital evidence, while Rebecca handled the investigative journalism. Together, we assembled a comprehensive picture of Serene's methods and motives. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, splashed across the front page of the Financial Tribune with supporting coverage in major business publications. The headline read, "The Queen of Castle Rock, How Serene Dreven Orchestrated a Corporate Coup." The article detailed Serene's systematic elimination of rivals, her manipulation of board dynamics, and her use of unwitting accomplices to achieve her goals. My story with Rhett and Ayla was presented as the most recent example of her methods, but Rebecca had kept her promise. I wasn't portrayed as a victim or a pawn, but as someone who'd chosen to act when confronted with betrayal. The article acknowledged that I'd been manipulated while still crediting me with the intelligence and determination to document the evidence that brought Rhett down. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Castle Rock's stock price plummeted, the board called an emergency meeting, and federal investigators opened a formal inquiry into the company's practices. Serene's carefully constructed empire began to crumble within hours of the article's publication. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, but I declined them all. I'd said everything I wanted to say through Rebecca's article. Now I wanted to watch the consequences unfold. The final confrontation came 3 days later, when Serene appeared at my front door. She looked older, diminished by the scandal that was consuming her life's work. "You've destroyed everything," she said when I opened the door. "No, I've revealed everything. There's a difference. I gave you a chance to be part of something bigger, to benefit from what I'd built. You chose to tear it down instead. I chose to tell the truth. The truth? The truth is that I built Castle Rock into what it is today. Every decision I made was for the good of the company. Every decision you made was for your own benefit. The company was just your tool." She studied my face, perhaps seeing something she'd missed during our earlier meetings. "You're not the man I thought you were." "No, I'm not. I'm someone who learned to fight back." "This isn't over, Pierce. I have resources, connections, ways of making your life difficult. Go ahead and try. But remember, I'm the man who brought down Rhett Vossin with a single phone call. I'm the man who helped expose your entire operation. Do you really want to find out what else I'm capable of?" The threat hung in the air between us. Serene had built her career on intimidation and manipulation, but those tools were useless against someone who'd already lost everything that mattered and discovered he was stronger for it. "Goodbye, Serene." I closed the door and watched through the security monitor as she walked back to her car. She moved slowly, like someone carrying a heavy burden. That evening, I received a call from David Kim, the research and development executive who'd been Serene's next target. "Mr. Eldrow, I wanted to thank you for what you did. The article saved my career, maybe my life." "You don't need to thank me. I was just telling the truth. Still, I appreciate it. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to call." After he hung up, I sat in my basement office, surrounded by the monitors and equipment that had become my weapons in a war I'd never expected to fight. The house was quiet, emptier without Ayla's presence, but also more peaceful. I'd started this journey as a victim, a man whose wife and her boss had tried to push him out of his own home. But I'd ended it as something else, someone who'd learned to use his skills and intelligence as weapons, someone who'd discovered that being underestimated was often an advantage. The mild-mannered IT consultant was gone, replaced by someone harder, more calculating, more dangerous. Someone who understood that in the modern world, information was power, and power was everything. I opened my laptop and began planning my next move. Castle Rock Innovations was finished, but there were other companies, other executives who thought they were untouchable. Rebecca Torres had shown me how to use my skills for investigative journalism, and I'd discovered I had a talent for it. The phone rang. Another reporter, another interview request. This time I answered. Pierce Eldrow speaking. Mr. Eldrow, this is Jennifer Walsh from 60 Minutes. We'd like to discuss a documentary about corporate manipulation and the people who fight back against it. I smiled, understanding that my story was just beginning. I'm listening. Outside, rain began to fall against the basement windows, but I barely noticed. I was already planning my next investigation, my next target, my next victory. They'd called me weak, dismissed me as irrelevant, treated me like a doormat in my own home. Now they'd learn what I was really capable of.